The coming of the wise men is something that has puzzled historians and authors ever since it happened. How did they know? It would seem that the Lord was using what they were good at and what would speak to them to get through to them, and in so doing was giving us also a lesson. We zoom into what is there, we use what works, we meet people where they're at. One starts with the quota of truth and fullness which a person has, and from there one constructs. One doesn't come to attack and to demolish, one respects and builds up. Everyone has something to work on. They were obviously of good faith and goodwill, and that is the starting point. If that is not there, then the operation is a non-starter. The soul is its own worst enemy. But the soul, genuinely wanting good, wants also light and is on the side of the light. The light of the world manifested himself to these wise men, these wise kings, in the ambit of light. In the Gospel of St. John, that light comes in already in the prologue, and so does the refusal of the light by those who are in darkness and not of good will. The fundamental option is no in some souls, and yes in others, and if there is a yes, then there is a hope that more light can be given. The soul full of its own light will not have any more light. It will keep transmitting what it has, but it will burn out. The hungry and empty soul can always receive more light. These adored, and they adored in an oriental mode. That would have included bodily prostration. They presented their gifts, and we are told what they were. They were expensive gifts, gifts of royalty, gifts of deity, gifts of a person to be buried and embalmed. That is interesting, for it shows how in the beginning the Word of God was able to command respect both on the level of the will and on the level of the body, and the expression of the will by the body and the use of physical objects. The senses were coming into Christian worship already in this occasion. Incense gives an otherness to our worship. It is maintained in our solemn masses, it is maintained in the Eastern Rite. It is something, when used with decorum, places us in another atmosphere, that of the ancient, that of the highest, that of the other, the inexpressible, the mystic, the holy and untouchable. We cannot say, but we can suggest the unutterable, and that is what physical worship, well executed, does. We need to give God only the best. It needs to be a wedding between body and soul in one whole movement of giving the best. The will and the heart and the mind must be engaged, otherwise it is not worship in spirit and in truth. It is pure ritualism, and that can be a disease. When one sees a liturgy very well executed, but in which people in the process are badly damaged and hurt by correction done without charity, then one sees that the optic of worship has not been perceived for what it is, for God is worshipped also in the way that we handle those around us. We can't bypass them for a greater glory. God sees it all. And so the atmosphere of our worship is sincerity, as was the case with these holy kings. They were sincere. There is an interesting passage in the writings of Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, who was shown this in vision, this strange scene, and she saw how the baby Jesus accepted this worship, which was incomplete theologically, because it was the expression of what they knew and what they had. They could not do more, but they did what they did, and they did what they could, and they did what they did well. So too, we must not judge our brethren across the board. People worship God in their own way, and we have no right to enter into the vision of God as regards how acceptable it is unto Him. All we can do is say, in all humility, the truth is one, and therefore if they are shown more light, they also should, in that same optic of worship, surrender their will to that light. We have nearer to us in time the case of Blessed John Henry Newman, lead kindly light. And we know from his apologia that he did not ever sin against the light. He always followed what he could see, and it became brighter and clearer. And for him, at a certain point, the question posed itself in a different way. He reached a point where he saw that the question then was, can I remain where I am and be saved? The light was becoming very bright, and it was challenging. People who have a weaker light may be very faithful to it, and we cannot judge them. But people who have a clear light and are not faithful to it are in trouble. Hence it is that we cannot say that a person, for instance, who has the fullness of theological knowledge, for instance, as a priest, and then opts to leave the Catholic Church for something else, and continues to serve God, in inverted commas, in that something else, maybe even as a clergyman, that person is actually in the same state as a person who might be brought up in that other light, which is less clear, but is faithful to what he has. The point is this: one is being faithful to what he has, the other is perhaps being very unfaithful and not actually offering true worship, because the true worship has to come from the will. And if the will is not being handed over, but is in a state of rebellion against a clarity of vision and light, which the mind knows and cannot avoid, then there is a problem. Padre Pio one time was confessing someone and said this straight away: you have been singing a hymn to the demon. Worship, if it is to be worship, has to be what the English word says and means: worthship, the creature recognizing the worth of his Creator.